My GPS calmly said, "You have arrived home," but I was surrounded by nothing except tall trees and darkness. There were no houses, no signs of civilization, just silence. Before I could react, my phone, dead for the last 30 minutes, lit up in my hand and started ringing from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard my little brother's voice, the same brother who died a year ago. If you're already feeling chills, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. This story is real, and it only gets stranger. My name is Hannah Keene, and I never believed in curses, hauntings, or anything outside of what we can measure and explain. I am a nurse, trained in facts, logic, and science. But everything I thought I knew about reality shattered the night my GPS took me somewhere I never meant to go. It started as a normal drive. My shift at the hospital had ended late, and I was driving back to my mother's house to check on her. She hadn't been the same after my younger brother Jacob died in a hiking accident last year. She spent most of her days staring out the back window at the forest, whispering things like, "He's calling us back." I always told her it was grief talking, nothing more. My usual route home was closed due to a landslide, so I followed the GPS reroute. At first, I didn't think much of it. It took me through small country roads, past old barns and fields. But after an hour, the scenery changed. Streetlights disappeared. The pavement turned to gravel. My radio lost signal. I kept driving because turning back would have taken longer. As the last bit of cell service dropped, I glanced at the clock. 11:46 p.m. The road narrowed until trees on both sides nearly touched above me, blocking out the moonlight. I turned off the radio completely just to hear the sound of my own thoughts. That's when the GPS voice, the same friendly voice I had heard 1,000 times, said something it had never said before. "You are almost there. Welcome back." I frowned. Welcome back? I hadn't been here before. I zoomed out on the GPS map, but it showed nothing but a green blank space. No street names, no landmarks, just a single blue dot moving deeper into the unknown. My heartbeat picked up. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just a glitch. I was tired, hungry, stressed. I kept repeating that until the GPS spoke again. "You have arrived home." I slammed my brakes. There was no house, no mailbox, no sign of human life, only a dirt clearing surrounded by towering pine trees, swaying in an icy wind. That's when my engine died. The dashboard lights flickered off. My phone screen went black. Total silence. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my breath fogging the windshield. Then my phone lit up on its own. Battery percentage, 1%. Caller ID, no number. I hesitated for only a second before answering. "Hannah?" A familiar voice said softly. My chest tightened. It was Jacob's voice. "I told you not to come back." I couldn't breathe. My brother had been dead for 12 months. Buried. Gone. Yet his voice was coming through the phone with perfect clarity. Calm, warning, and so heartbreakingly real. "Listen to me," he said. "You need to get out of the car, but whatever you do not follow the lights." Before I could speak, the call ended, and in that silence, through the trees around me, I started to see them, little flickers of light, one by one, like lanterns moving closer. My entire body felt frozen as I watched those flickering lights appear in the distance, soft at first, scattered like faint fireflies, but then growing brighter, larger, moving with purpose. They didn't float randomly like insects. They moved with rhythm, like footsteps. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to convince myself this was just exhaustion or some strange visual distortion from my headlights. But the headlights were off. The car battery was dead. The lights in the forest were the only source of illumination, gently swaying side to side as if held by unseen hands. My heart pounded harder with each passing second, the silence pressing in around me like a solid wall. I kept replaying Jacob's voice in my mind. "Do not follow the lights." The warning echoed inside my skull, louder than my own heartbeat. I forced my shaking fingers to unlock my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. The phone felt warm in my hand, as if it had just been taken off a charger, even though the battery was nearly dead. I remembered how my brother used to tease me for trusting technology more than my instincts. One day it'll lead you somewhere you can't come back from, he had once said, laughing. Back then, I thought it was just a joke. Now, sitting alone in a forest that shouldn't exist on any navigation route, I realized something was deeply, horribly wrong. Suddenly, the GPS lit up again, even though the car was powered off. The screen flickered and then displayed a single sentence in plain white text on a black background. Step out of the vehicle. I stared at it, unable to process how a system with no power could still be functioning. The lights outside the car drew nearer, now clearly arranged in a half-circle facing me, like a silent welcoming committee. My breath fogged the air as I exhaled, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I pressed the door lock button, but to my horror, the locks clicked open instead. The door handle shifted, not by my hand, but as if someone outside had gently lifted it. Panic surged through me as I shoved my shoulder against the door, forcing it shut again. I held it with all my strength while my mind fought between two choices: stay inside a powerless car that could no longer protect me, or step into the darkness where something waited. The phone buzzed again. Another call. This time, the caller ID didn't say unknown. It said, Mom. Relief burst through me. Maybe she had sensed something was wrong. Maybe she had tracked my location. I answered immediately, my voice cracking as I said, Mom, please, I think I'm lost. But what I heard on the other end wasn't my mother's voice. It was breathing, slow, deep, and then a whisper. You never should have come back here. The voice was my mother's tone, but not her cadence. It sounded like someone was wearing her voice. My blood ran cold. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen as if it might reveal the truth. Then, from the forest, I heard another voice. This time, unquestionably, undeniably, Jacob, but not from the phone, from the trees. Hannah, he called, his voice soft and pleading. You have to help me. I'm still here. Every part of me wanted to run to him, the yearning to hear my brother again, to see him again, pulled at something primal inside me, a need stronger than logic. But then the lights shifted. They moved apart, creating a path deeper into the forest, as if inviting me to follow. My phone buzzed once more. A text message appeared. If you see me, it's not me. My head spun. The world tilted. I dropped the phone in my lap and forced myself to take a breath. My brother was gone. He was buried. I had watched the casket lowered into the ground. Whatever was calling me now wasn't him. It was something that knew him, something that had been waiting, gathering memories, gathering voices. My survival instinct finally broke through the fog of grief and fear. I made my decision. I could not stay in the car. It was no longer a barrier, and I could not follow the lights that would lead me into whatever had taken my brother. The only option I had left was to go in the direction without lights, into the darkness. My pulse hammered as I reached for the flashlight in my glove compartment. The phone buzzed again, one last time. This time, I didn't look at it. I stepped out of the car, closing the door as quietly as I could. Instantly, the forest sounds changed. A breeze rustled the leaves. The lights stopped moving, and from somewhere deep within the trees, I heard a low, distant hum, like something large was awakening. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and whispered to myself, You're not here to find Jacob. You're here to survive. As I turned away from the lights and stepped into the dark woods, the first raindrop fell on my cheek. The forest seemed to breathe in with me, as if it had just claimed me. The deeper I moved into the forest, the quieter everything became, not in a natural way, but in a way that felt controlled, like the forest itself was holding its breath. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating branches that twisted above me like fingers. Behind me, the faint lights I had refused to follow suddenly went still, as if whatever carried them had paused to observe my decision. My heart pounded harder with every step, but I knew that going toward the lights would only lead me to whatever had taken my brother. I had to choose the one option no sane person would choose: walk into the pitch-black unknown with nothing but instinct as my guide. The air shifted around me, carrying a faint smell of damp soil and pine. Then I saw it, a footprint in the mud, not deep enough to be left by a heavy animal, not wide enough to be from a boot. It was bare, human. My breath caught. A few feet ahead, another, and another, as if someone had walked here with no shoes, no hesitation, and absolute familiarity with the terrain. I swallowed the rising panic and reminded myself of the text message. If you see me, it's not me. That meant whatever looked like Jacob, or sounded like Jacob, was meant to lure me. But what if this was him? What if he had survived? What if he had called me for help? For a moment, my grief threatened to override my logic. But then, another message blinked onto my phone screen, even though I had no signal or service. Just one sentence. This is how it started for me. My stomach twisted. Was this message from Jacob? Was the forest showing me what happened to him? Ahead, through the trees, I saw a faint glow, not white like the earlier lights, but warm and flickering, like a small fire. My mind raced. Someone else had to be out here. Maybe a campsite, maybe a hiker, maybe help. I forced myself to keep walking until I could see through the brush. A small clearing opened before me. In the center stood a rusted metal structure, like a hunting cabin or ranger outpost, partially sunken into the ground. Its single window glowed with the flickering orange light of a lantern. My pulse quickened. That cabin should not exist. I had spent my childhood in these mountains. There was no record of any building out here, yet it looked old, as if it had always been here. A memory surfaced, my grandfather once telling me, "This forest has places that weren't built. They were revealed." I hadn't understood him then. Now I did. This wasn't a cabin someone had constructed. This was a place the forest allowed to appear. I edged closer, trying to stay silent. The lantern light flickered through the window. Inside, I saw movement. Someone pacing slowly. A shadow that looked like a human figure, but its gait was wrong. Too smooth, too deliberate. My heart slammed against my ribs. If I walked away, I might lose my only chance to understand what was happening. If I got closer, I might never walk away again. The figure paused, then turned toward the window. The lantern light illuminated its face. I staggered backward and clapped my hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. It was Jacob, his face, his hair, his clothes from the day he disappeared. But his eyes were wrong, completely black, no whites, just endless voids staring straight through the glass, straight at me. My legs trembled, but I couldn't move. His head tilted slowly in an unnatural motion, like a puppet rotating on strings. Then something moved behind him. A tall, thin silhouette, much larger than any human, rose up from the darkness in the cabin. It didn't walk into view. It unfolded, as if it had been part of the cabin itself, embedded in the shadows. Its shape was barely visible, but I could see its long arms stretching along the walls. Jacob's voice echoed from inside the cabin, but his lips never moved. The voice came from the thing behind him. "You finally came home." The words were soft, welcoming, spoken in my brother's tone, yet filled with something ancient and cold. That was the moment I understood the truth. Jacob had not died in the forest. The forest had taken him. It had kept his image, his voice, his memories, not to haunt me, but to call me home. And now it was done waiting. A strange calm washed over me. Panic was no longer useful. Running was no longer an option. I wasn't here to escape. I was here to end this, one way or another. My entire life, I believed my family was cursed by grief. I thought we were unlucky. But now I understood. We had been chosen. The forest didn't trap us by force. It lured us with love. And in that moment, I made my decision. I stepped forward into the clearing, not as prey, but as someone ready to confront the truth that had hunted my bloodline for generations. The moment I stepped into the clearing, the air shifted, like the forest itself exhaled in anticipation. The cabin ahead of me flickered with the soft glow of the lantern inside, and Jacob, or what was wearing his face, stood motionless at the window, those all-black eyes locked directly onto mine. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced my feet to stay planted. The thing behind him, tall, formless, stretching in unnatural ways, began to move, not walking, but flowing across the room like shadow being dragged by an unseen current. My breath came out in shaky bursts as I stepped forward again, but the earth beneath my feet felt different now, softer, like I was walking on something alive. I could hear a faint heartbeat under the soil, slow and powerful, pulsing in rhythm with my own. Then Jacob spoke, not from his mouth, but from everywhere around me. It was his voice layered with something older, deeper, vibrating in my chest. "You still hear him," the voice said, "because he never left." I closed my eyes for half a second, and a memory surged into my mind. Jacob as a child, laughing as we played near the forest edge, telling me the trees were whispering. At the time, I had laughed too, believing it was our imagination. But what if the forest had been speaking all along, choosing him first, and now calling for me? My flashlight flickered. A gust of icy wind swept through the clearing, bending the trees without a single sound of leaves rustling. Silence. A silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Then the door to the cabin slowly creaked open, though no one touched it. The lantern inside flared brighter for 1 second, casting a warm glow that spilled into the clearing like a path inviting me in. I stood frozen, tears burning in my eyes, not from fear, but from the sight of Jacob's face. His expression was blank, but there was something in his posture that seemed pleading, as if part of him was still in there, trapped behind the thing that controlled him. "Jacob," I whispered, my voice cracking. In an instant, the warm light vanished. The lantern went out. Darkness swallowed the cabin interior. Before I could react, a deep, resonant thud echoed through the ground, like a giant heartbeat. The air vibrated with it, rattling my bones. Jacob stepped forward out of the cabin doorway. His footsteps made no sound. His eyes remained fixed on me as his voice, through the forest, said, "You were never meant to leave. You are the last one. The bloodline ends where it began." Behind him, the tall entity emerged fully into the clearing. It had no defined face, no features, only an outline of something vaguely human stretched beyond normal proportions. Its presence pressed against my mind like pressure from deep underwater, not attacking, but pulling, as if trying to absorb not just my body, but my thoughts, my memories, everything that made me human. Roots began to rise from the ground around me, twisting like fingers reaching for my ankles. Each heartbeat beneath the soil grew louder in my ears until I realized it wasn't the forest's heartbeat. It was mine. The forest wasn't alive in the way I understood. It was alive because of us, because of those it had claimed before me. It was feeding on memory, identity, blood. It wasn't growing. It was remembering. Suddenly, a different voice cut through the air, faint but clear. "Hannah, don't listen. Don't believe it." My breath caught. It was Jacob's real voice, not the cold mimicry, not the forest. It came from within him, buried under layers of echoes. His eyes flickered for a split second, white flashing through the black. He was fighting. He was trying to reach me. "Hannah," he said again, pain in every syllable. "Run." The entity whipped its head toward him, and the black in Jacob's eyes returned. The forest voice hissed with rage. My heart broke open. This thing hadn't just killed my brother. It had kept him, used him. I felt something shift inside me. Fear was gone. Only love remained, and that love was not a weakness. It was my weapon. I took a deep breath and shouted into the clearing, "You don't own him. You don't own me." The forest responded with a roar, of wind, of voices, of cracking earth. Roots shot toward me, but I dodged, running not away, but toward the cabin, toward Jacob. The entity lunged, its form distorting as branches bent like arms to block me. I squeezed past them, feeling thorns slice across my arms. As I reached Jacob, I grabbed his shoulders. His skin was ice cold. Shadows bled from his eyes. The forest voice screamed through him, "He is gone." But I saw a tear spill down his cheek, real, human. "Jacob," I whispered, pressing my forehead to his, "you don't have to stay." The ground trembled violently. The shadow creature shrieked, lunging forward. I made my choice in that moment, not to save myself, but to set Jacob free. And as I did, I felt everything shift. The heartbeat beneath the forest floor faltered. faded, stopped, and with that silence I knew I had broken something ancient, but I also knew something else had awakened. I don't remember falling, only the sensation of the world tilting and the cold forest floor rising to meet me. When my eyes opened, I was lying in the clearing alone. The cabin, the lights, even Jacob, gone. The trees stood still and silent, as if nothing had happened. The lantern that had once glowed in the window sat broken on the ground like it had been there for decades, rusted and half buried in dirt. My body ached as I pushed myself up, every muscle trembling, not from pain but from the crushing realization that I was still here, and so was something else. For a long moment, I knelt there in silence, trying to make sense of what I had done, what I had seen. Had I freed Jacob's soul? Or had I only released something far more dangerous into the world? The forest no longer felt hostile but watchful, like a breathing giant that had momentarily quieted its hunger. I could feel it studying me, not attacking, not reaching for me this time, but observing, almost as if it were waiting to see what I would do next. As I stood on shaky legs, a faint warmth brushed across my cheek. It was like a hand, soft, familiar, my brother's presence, not in body, not in voice, but in feeling. He was gone, truly gone this time, freed. And yet I understood with chilling clarity that the forest had not lost interest in me. It had simply changed its nature, no longer hunting, but expecting. The words spoken by that ancient voice echoed in my mind. The bloodline ends where it began. I knew then that this wasn't just about Jacob or me. It was about our family, our history, something that started generations before us and had been silently carrying through our blood, waiting for the one who would finally answer its call. I thought of my mother, of the way she had stared at the forest after Jacob's death, whispering that he was calling us home. I had assumed it was grief, madness, but now I knew she wasn't losing her mind. She was remembering. The forest had whispered to her once, and she had tried to resist, but the call had passed to me. And unlike those before me, I didn't run. I stepped toward it. I confronted it. And in doing so, I had broken whatever cycle bound us, but not without consequence. A distant rumble rolled through the trees, not from thunder, but from deep within the earth. It wasn't aggressive, nor was it comforting. It was acknowledgement, a shift. Something had changed. The forest no longer needed to chase me, because it had marked me as the one who would finish what was started long before I was born. As I made my way through the woods, guided now not by fear, but by a strange sense of clarity, I found the road where my car once was. It was gone. No sign of tire marks, no clearing in the trees, only dense forest, as if the road had never existed at all. My GPS still sat in my hand, blank, but as I stared at it, words appeared slowly across the dark screen. Route recalculating, not in the calm robotic tone I had heard before, but in a slower, deeper rhythm, as if the forest itself was speaking through it. Beneath those words, a single line appeared. We're not done yet. I felt no panic this time, only resolve. For the first time in my life, I understood that this wasn't a nightmare I could escape. This was a truth I had uncovered, a truth that had waited for generations. I turned away from where the car should have been and began walking toward the horizon, where dawn was breaking in soft shades of gold and blue. The world looked ordinary again, birds beginning to sing, trees swaying gently in the morning breeze. But I knew the difference now. I knew that behind every peaceful breeze, every quiet patch of forest, something old and alive was waiting, not to harm, not to haunt, but to be answered. And I was now the only one who could. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of my purpose. If this ending made your heart race or made you think twice about following your GPS at night, make sure you hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps me bring you the